Welcome back to time series analysis. Today we're going to talk about recursive and adaptive estimation, covered in chapter 11 of the book, and then we are going to round off with some outlook as to what you can do past this course, as this is the last session. So why do we want to do recursive and adaptive estimation? If we go back to the data we showed a long time ago on the heat consumption in distributed heating network and the temperature, what we see is that on one axis we have the black lines back there as the heat consumption, and then we have the temperatures in front. So we see that as a relation. And what happens is that as time passes, we get more information. Now, what should you do? Should you adjust your previous estimate, or should you recalculate everything? I'm in preference for the latter. And we should also keep in mind that models are approximations. All models are wrong, some are useful, as was said by Box some years ago. So also keep in mind that the best approximation may change with time. So it may not be the same model that fits this always. And what we want to do is to make sure that whatever we do is optimal right now when we're going to need it. To get a prediction now, it doesn't matter so much that it was good 10 years ago. You need to have something that works well now. So which models are we looking at? We're looking at things that can be solved directly by a least squares estimation method. So we have a pure regression model, we have a finite impulse response model, we have the autoregressive model, and the autoregressive model with external input. Now, what is the common part of all these is that, well, we can write it on the usual linear regression form, where the x here, predictor, has different things. So what can the predictor contain? It can contain a column of ones to get a mean value. It can contain some previous observations, getting the autoregressive part, and it can contain a lot of different other regressors or inputs, depending on which model you're in. But what it only does is that it only includes epsilon t. There's no other epsilons in here. So how do we do this? It's the same old story. Get back to the simple regression model. We have some observations, and we have some design matrix here, and we want to minimize the sum of square prediction errors. And the estimator from this is the usual x transpose x inverse x transpose y, as we had it just right there. Now, that was what we used to do. How do we get from one point in time to the next? Let's look at x transpose x. What is the structure of that? Basically, it's a sum of a lot of products up to time t. And we can write it like this, where each of these products is the all combination of the different x's at each point in time. Likewise, ht is also the design matrix multiplied on yt. And if you look closer into it, you will see that the rows in xt at a particular point in time are only multiplied by the observation at the same point in time. That makes a lot of sense. The same thing up here. It's only rows at the same time that are multiplied together. It makes a lot of sense. So we have these sums out here. You may recall that you've seen these before. If you think back to the trend models, the structure there was effectively the same. Now we just say that x is much more flexible than just some kind of f of a time shift. It also means that we can do the update in the same way as for the trend model. We have it to be the update of RT as x transpose x is what it was before, plus the most recent one. And the update of HT is what it was before, plus the most recent one. We don't have the memory thing here that we needed to shift things as we did in the trend model, because in the trend model we shifted the origo to be so the time axis to be the current time. Therefore, it was a little bit more complicated in that sense, but it's underneath the hood, it's the same thing happening. And then we can solve for theta hat, and of course we should only do this when RT can be inverted. So start with zeros and wait with an estimate until RT is invertible. That's basically how the recursive least squares run. Now, what we can do is we can make it a little bit simpler by eliminating HT in the equation. We still need to look at the covariance structure, and then we can do an update. What was the previous estimate? What is the current estimate? We get that by look at the, well, this we've seen before. It's the prediction error. YT minus the prediction of this one with the previous theta, with something multiplied in front. That also sounds familiar. It's like the Kalman gain from previous. Not quite the same thing, but it's parallel. As we also did in the linear trend model, we can also, no, we didn't do that there actually. We can also avoid the matrix inversion. We have the RT inverse here. So depending on the condition number of this matrix up here, we may want to make the code more robust by avoiding the inversion. That gives us, instead of 2 equations, 3 equations. So we start out by calculating the Kalman gain. That's basically what we have up here. Just formulate it with P instead of R. And then, so that the update equation is very similar to what we have up here. What we have to look at, what is in this Kalman gain. First, let's look at the denominator and see that, well, that's not a matrix, it's just a number. So, and then we have X transpose on PT minus 1 and XT. That also becomes just a number. So we're just dividing by a number, which is a very simple operation. And when we get to the update of P down here, what we do realize or identify is that when we look at this at first complicated fraction, we see that most of it is basically what we have up there already. So we can write this much simpler. Also the fact that this and that is the transpose of this, so we only need to calculate this once, and then we can do the rest in a very easy way. So if calculation time matters, and if you have problems with invertibility of R, this is more robust. Now, let's get back to the example that we looked at previously, where we have the outdoor temperature up here, and then we have the consumption in the district heating network down here, or a winter season. So of course, when the temperature gets low, the consumption goes up. No big surprise there. Now, if you just run the recursive least square filter through this, what we get are estimates of the intercept, the mean heat consumption, and what is the slope for the temperature. And what we see is that when we get to the winter season, we start to get a negative slope, but initially we don't have much information about the temperature dependence. And the intercept also changes over time. So the base load changes with time as well. The initial noise out here is because I started inverting very early on. Normally you should just have a larger burn-in period to make it more stable out there. But I included it here just to say that if you see stuff like this in the beginning, don't be too worried about that.